The Harmonic Convergence, Chapter 13, Atlantic Crossing. We continued sailing in a northwesterly direction for another 3 days. The wind strength decreased each day until eventually, for the first time in over a week, patches of blue sky were visible. The storm front and low-pressure air mass had almost passed, allowing for more settled conditions. I have been waiting for the North Atlantic drift currents to unite with the northwesterly winds, announced Maxim. These currents should take us to the eastern side of England, where we can make landfall along the ancient rugged coastline of Cornwall. This way, we will be able to avoid the Isles of Scilly, and, in particular, the treacherous rocks known as Fastnet. These are well known as a shipping graveyard. As the evening gently slipped into dusk, Maxim adjusted the helm and set a course in an easterly direction. We should make a land sighting in approximately 2 to 3 days, he said. Orca 2 was now sailing upright on a beam reach at 6 to 7 knots. We were assisted with a 2 to 3 knot current from the North Atlantic drift, so we could average 8 to 10 knots consistently, allowing us to traverse over 200 miles each day. On this particularly wonderful morning, we all gathered on the deck and set a table with beverages and refreshments. Some of us swung in the hammocks, others settled into the killim rugs on the deck, and Maxim was at the helm. Arnau, positioned comfortably on a killim rug, looked perplexed as he reached over and took an apple from the fruit bowl. I am wanting to know about the Celtic Druids, who became the early Egyptians, he said. They were never mind-controlled, were they? The early Egyptians were ingenious, exclaimed Naishara. They could not be mind-controlled, and in fact, they attempted to change the lunar matrix by removing the dissonant frequencies that were maintaining the third density trap. And they nearly succeeded, said Altar, one eye squinting and his index finger raised. However, the Dark Ones saw what they were doing and thwarted their plan. Indeed, said Maxim. Do you remember the three-headed monster that the Dark Ones created to mind-control humanity? Maxim looked into the eyes of the younger members of the Light family, one after the other. Oh, I know, exclaimed Asteria. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Bravo, said Naishara, and clapped her hands. At that time, the Celtic and Druid practices were held in the collective unconscious mind of humanity, said Sophia. When the Dark Ones instigated the 3 new religions, however, they replaced the Celtic and Druid practices by installing their own agenda into the minds of the masses. This is the power of mind control, agreed Ankai. And each variation of those 3 religious practices stated that they were the only way to spiritual enlightenment, and therefore the only one truth, exclaimed Sarah. Isn't it amazing that the Dark Ones created 3 religions, and yet each one claims to be the only way to enlightenment, said Ariana. It is a masterful plan, and as we all know, it is called divide and conquer, I said. They have always used the same modus operandi, and it is even stronger in the 21st century. In Earth's future, the Dark Ones then unleashed the next 3-headed monster into the minds of humanity, said Sophia. The first head of this monster was a new banking system that created money out of thin air and at no cost to the banks. This system was centered in London and pushed humanity into debt slavery. Ah yes, I have heard of the banking system in Earth's future, said Minerva. And what were the other heads of this monster? The second head of this monster is a global army under the control of the United Nations, said Sophia. Their headquarters are established in New York, in the Americas. And the third head of this monster is the mass media, who mind control humanity, I said. All 3 heads of the monster, the banking system, the global armies, and the media are under the full control of the Dark Ones. For many, the response to what we are sharing will send the ego mind into disbelief and fear, or even anger, said Sarah. This information evokes the emotions that we have not integrated from our childhood. Really? Inquired Arnau. What kinds of emotions? I mean, how would you describe them? I am referring to feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, said Sarah. And they are born out of the illusion that we are disconnected from the love of Source. Humanity has become addicted to the loss of love. Yes, I agreed. And the ego is trying to protect us from the loss of love. Our ego is trying to protect us from the loss of love, exclaimed Asteria. How does that work? Well, laughed Sarah, the ego is a big topic. However, it is essential to understand if we want to ascend. I want to know more about the loss of love, said Minerva, and flashed Arnau a flirtatious glance. Well, began Sophia, everything is a frequency. As a higher frequency, the human being knows that it is a soul and sometimes yearns to experience contrast to better understand love. I do not really understand, said Arnau. Sophia smiled fondly at Arnau, appreciating his inquisitive and open mind. The third density provides an extreme contrast, and that can cause extreme unhappiness, she began. This extreme unhappiness is known as suffering. It is through suffering that a soul can find the courage to become conscious and choose love. If the soul did not experience suffering, it would not search for the way out of suffering, and empower itself to choose love. Indeed, said Naishara. A soul will often reach rock bottom before it decides that it has had enough. It is through suffering that souls find the impetus to do their inner work and heal. And the greater the amount of suffering that they have experienced, the greater the experience of love that they can manifest or choose. And, of course, remembered Arnau, each soul chooses to experience this suffering. Remember, the soul who is choosing to come to Earth is interviewed by the Federation, said Sophia, and together with their higher selves and guides, they choose the parents, society, and culture that can offer the best experience of contrast. The moment that the soul steps into a biological body, however, they forget who they are and become the program that they chose to experience. Yes, I said, and poured myself a cup of tea. Whenever a soul incarnates, they immediately adopt all of the programming and the agreements that make up the density that they have incarnated into. So, a soul experiences the third density on Earth simply by being born? Inquired Minerva. To answer your question, said Sophia, her head inclined, I will first need to talk about the development of the baby. When the avatar is born, the baby has little or no conscious awareness and is now a third density being. The baby does, however, have an ego, and the baby's ego thinks that it is the mother. Really? The baby's ego thinks that the baby and the mother are the same being? Exclaimed Shama Ra. Exactly, smiled Sophia. The mother will look into the baby's eyes, and the baby will look into the mother's eyes, and they both smile in recognition. Remember, said Naishara, the baby has been in the womb for 9 months, listening to and feeling all of the mother's emotions and energies. Ankai nodded in agreement. Most mothers learn very quickly that if they are having a bad day, so does the baby, because the baby thinks and feels that it is still a part of the mother. At around the age of 2, interjected Sarah, the baby separates from the mother, or rather, the baby's ego begins to make its presence known. Interesting. And how does the ego express itself? Asked Cinderella. The baby begins to change, said Irama. It is a change of energy. This sense of separation is caused when the ego begins to express itself. The baby now feels alone and no longer connected to the mother in the same way. In fact, the baby feels abandoned by the mother. Well, at such a young age, the baby has not developed an intellectual mind to be able to rationalize what is happening, and it cannot generate the love that it needs for itself. The baby's feelings of abandonment and frustration is the foundation of anger, agreed Sophia. And that anger, later in life, can create disorders or emotional problems. In other words, the baby feels the loss of love, which is the dynamic that is at the core of all third density experiences. By the age of 3, the young child is programmed for the rest of its life, I said. The 3-year-old is also still at an age where the rational, logical mind has not developed and so he or she is still unable to interpret the reality that is happening around them. Sophia nodded. That is correct, Samira. And the baby, toddler, and young child have not yet developed emotional intelligence. Therefore, in adulthood, they have no way of translating how they were feeling during those formative years. Well, the soul as a human being or an avatar is not free thinking, interjected Altar. They have absorbed their programming and have forgotten or are unaware that they are part of the universal consciousness being prime creator. In third density, said Dulkara, they are not even taught that universal consciousness is an aspect of themselves. As the child grows into an adult, continued Sophia, the entire life of the avatar is playing out their formative conditioning, recreating the drama that as a baby they were unable to comprehend. Irrespective of physical aging, in most avatars today there is a fragile inner child, said Ariana. The inner child is a consciousness that feels disconnected, abandoned, and unloved. The child, adolescent, or adult spends the rest of their life addicted to these feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness that are trapped in the body. Maxim nodded in agreement. This is the third density experience. Unconscious, programmed behavior as a result of those early childhood experiences. Well, how is the ego created in the first place? I mean, what is it exactly? Inquired Arnau. The ego is created out of the sense of being disconnected from source or prime creator, explained Sophia. It is created out of that vacuum. On third density Earth, that separation feels real because the avatar is inside the third density lunar matrix. It is the non-authentic part of who we are, agreed Imra. Yes, it sees itself as separate and tries to maintain that separateness both from Prime Creator and the rest of humanity, said Ariana. Therefore, it is often the case that a human being fears the journey back to Prime Creator because the ego is afraid that it will lose its identity. Are you saying that to journey back to Prime Creator, the individual needs to quieten the ego? Inquired Arnau. Yes, smiled Sophia. The ego fears its own annihilation and the idea that it could no longer exist. It will even take the last breath out of the avatar to defend its feelings of separateness from everything else. On Earth, deception is the norm, said Naishara. This is an illusion, and it drives the whole system of duality. So, would you say that the ego is shaped by the avatar's own experiences? Therefore, the ego is individual to every person? Asked Minerva. Yes, said Ankai, and actually, the ego can be described as the personality, as it is created out of the programmed beliefs of each particular avatar. Therefore, the ego is a collaboration of all of the experiences that an individual avatar has encountered. So, to find our way back to Prime Creator, we need to know what we believe, said Asteria. Absolutely, said Sarah. Most people think that whatever they say, think or do is who they really are. They wonder, how could this not be me? However, most of their words, thoughts and actions are their programming from the third density matrix and the beliefs that they are attached to as a result of their programming. And would you say that they brought similar beliefs with them before they incarnated onto the earth? Asked Asteria. Yes, most definitely, said Maxim. As already mentioned, each soul chose their parents depending on what they wanted to learn. I am perplexed as to why the human being cannot remember their childhood, exclaimed Shama-Ra. Most humans are a stranger to their programming because they cannot remember their experiences from early childhood, replied Sophia. That is because the ego will erase from memory any disturbing events and rewrite history to keep the avatar in the illusion of separation. Or it will edit parts of an individual's life so that the person is oblivious to their beliefs. In fact, I said, the ego will avoid whatever it thinks the avatar is unable to deal with. The ego determines what the individual can or cannot see about their own behavior, said Sophia. The ego is the gatekeeper of the avatar's truth. It defines what is real and not real, what it wants to accept and what it wants to reject, and all according to its own interpretation. Oh my! Exclaimed Shama-Ra, shaking her head from side to side. Well, if an individual cannot see their beliefs, how can they change them? To change their beliefs, said Sophia, they need to watch their own thoughts, words, and actions. This is their inner work. Well, that would take a lot of concentration, laughed Asteria. However, even then, it would still be confusing to understand our beliefs. Can you explain what it feels like when the ego is in control? Oh, I know the answer to that question, exclaimed Shama-Ra, her hand raised and jumping up and down in her seat. When a person is triggered. That is correct, laughed Sophia. When a person is triggered, a sensation rises up through the avatar's consciousness, and their immediate reaction is to defend their position. The ego defends its position by attacking the person who triggered them.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true.
Attacking? Blurted Minerva. Do you mean actually physically attacking another person? The most frequent way that the ego will attack is by judging the other person, I said. The ego makes up a story in the individual's head, a story that isn't true, and then attaches itself to that story. This judgment or story keeps them in the frequency of being triggered. A trigger is not a feeling, it is a reaction, explained Imra. A reaction is a signal for the avatar to see that they have an issue that the ego is not seeing. When you find yourself in judgment, said Naishara, it is an indication that you are not feeling good about yourself. In fact, the ego has stepped in to make someone or something else responsible for not feeling good. Sarah nodded in agreement. The avatar is not feeling good because the other person has triggered a feeling from their childhood, she said. The feeling wants to rise up, to be felt and integrated. However, to avoid the feeling, the ego judges the other person. The ego will never feel good about itself, interjected Shama Ra. It is important to know that whenever a person is judging, said Irama, they are actually talking about themselves, and that is what the ego does not realize. Well, what if I tell Asteria that she is not being honest? Said Minerva, and laughing, she affectionately pushed her sister's shoulder. Not being honest, laughed Asteria, is an indication that you are dishonest and you perceive it in someone else, even if it is not there, because you do not want to look at it within yourself. We all laughed. The ego has no boundaries, laughed Sophia. Therefore, the ego's stories are very convincing, and it is unconcerned with manipulating any situation or person to support its controlling agenda. In other words, the ego is everything apart from love, compassion, empathy, and integration. Well, inquired Cinderella, pouring a cup of tea. What is the best thing to do when you know that you are judging someone? If the individual finds themselves in judgment, replied Sophia, the best thing to do is stop. Turn it around. What they are judging is showing them what they have not accepted in themselves. When a person's thoughts, words, and actions are not of love, then they are operating from their ego. It is that simple, agreed Naishara. The ego certainly is very slippery, laughed Shamara. Yes, it certainly is, exclaimed Cinderella. Another tool that the ego uses to avoid feeling the feelings from childhood is justification, explained Ariana. The moment an individual has to justify anything, they do not believe it either. Do you mean that when the ego uses justification, it is once again attempting to convince the other person that they are right and the other person is wrong? Asked Asteria. Maxim nodded. When the ego is blaming and justifying, he explained, it is avoiding seeing its own behavior. It is avoiding seeing the strategies that it uses to prevent the avatar from feeling the pain in its shadows. Shadows? Inquired Minerva. Are you referring to the subconscious? That is to say, the place inside us where we keep our beliefs and pain? Yes, that is correct, said Maxim. I have heard that anger is one of the most destructive reactions that a human being can feel, said Arnau.
Fuck you!
It is also one of the ways that the ego defends its position, said Ariana. Ah, yes, anger, exclaimed Irama. Anger is the avoidance of feeling helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness. As already mentioned, these three feelings are at the core of all of our ego behaviors. Anger is the avoidance of feeling helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, exclaimed Irama. As already mentioned, these three feelings are at the core of our ego behaviors. Yes, interjected Altar. The more the ego feels out of control, the more it will attempt to control every situation and person in its life. There will be a myriad of unrealistic boundaries, requests, and terms and conditions. Asteria stood up, and her hands on her hips, a frown across her face. She stomped her foot and declared, "Everything has to go my way." We all laughed. "That is right," giggled Sophia. "Everything has to go the way that the ego wants it to go." When the other person reacts, the ego can then feel justified in pushing them out of their life, be it in business, friendship, or love. It will all become too much, and they just want to give up. "I am out of here," said Asteria defiantly, and turning her back on us, she stomped into the cabin. "And make sure that you slam the door on the way out," shouted Naishara. We all burst into laughter again. "Yes," laughed Sophia, "you are correct. The next reaction from the ego is, 'I am out of here.' The ego will end relationships, storming off into the night and spending hours, days, weeks, or even years angry with the other person." Asteria returned to the deck and, settling herself on the Killam cushions, she poured herself a cup of tea. "The ego's strategy," she laughed, "in that case, is to push the person who has triggered their feelings out of their life so that the ego can stay in control. Every time an avatar chooses anger, frustration, and confusion," added Dulkara, "they are accepting the program of third density mind control." "In a nutshell," said Naishara, "if an individual is not feeling love, then they are operating from their ego." "Of course," exclaimed Shamara, "the ego will always try to convince its avatar that it is right and it knows the truth." "The ego is always right," said Imra. "Oh, yes," said Sarah, and began peeling an orange. The ego holds onto what it believes by rejecting all other concepts, and it is only by small increments that it will accept something close to what it already knows. Usually, it will reject what it does not know, and this makes the integration of unresolved feelings even more difficult. "A person's truth is only based on what is in their conscious reality," said Dulkara. "Whatever they believe in, that is their truth. It is not the truth, but it is their truth." "What an individual believes is their truth," agreed Altar. "However, if the ego is there, their truth will be coming from their ego. And furthermore, when an individual has a gut feeling about something," said Maxim, "it is important to ask themselves, does this feeling come from my ego or my higher self? If they have not dealt with their programming, then the gut feeling is most likely from their ego." "An individual may say, if it feels right, then it must be right," agreed Imra, "without taking into consideration their beliefs. If their belief structure is programmed by a childhood of abuse, and they have not integrated those feelings, then abuse is what they will draw to themselves because it is a frequency match. Everything that you see in your outer world is a reflection of what you need to look at in your inner world, said Dulkara. Remember, every individual has created or co-created their experience to show themselves what is occurring in their inner world. So the ego is always right, said Maxim, and to stop an individual from feeling their feelings, if it isn't attacking someone else, it will attack its own avatar. Oh, yes, the ego is good at attacking its own avatar, said Shamara. I am still unsure about beliefs, said Arnau. Can you give me some examples of the kinds of beliefs that are in a person's shadows? Obviously, you do not mean a belief like we need to save the whales or we all need to love one another. Sophia laughed. She said, and looked out to the sea. Well, she looked back at Arnau. It might be that you have the belief, I am unlovable. People always leave me. I am not good enough. Or I am powerless. You will then attract situations where others are incapable of loving you, who always leave you, who regard you as inadequate, or who power over you. You wonder, why does this always happen to me? However, it is a belief in your subconscious and therefore a frequency. So it attracts the people who can show you what you believe about yourself. Yes, said Ankai. This is how people dovetail one another, perfectly reflecting the same frequency, and in this way, they are a frequency match. Oh, do you mean, said Shamara, for example, if a woman feels like a victim and therefore feels powerless, that she will attract a perpetrator who powers over her? You have it, said Naishara. And it can get even trickier, I said. What if a woman is actually attracting perpetrators so that she can get her revenge? It is only by observing your thoughts, words, and actions that you can decipher what is in your shadows, said Sophia. This is the inner work that we have been referring to, and it involves a deep search or observation of oneself. Within the third density matrix, interjected Maxim, the avatar was not designed to wake up, and the soul knows this before entering the avatar. Humans are programmed, and nothing in that programming will wake them up. I did not know this, said Asteria. So what will wake them up? It takes enormous desire and commitment, said Sophia. However, the soul brought this desire and commitment with them to ensure that they wake up. There is also a trigger or marker in their DNA to wake them up, I said, and at some point in their life, it will be activated. It is their limited ideas and beliefs, their attachment to those ideas and beliefs, as well as their non-integrated emotions, that is the trap. As humans start to understand higher concepts and acquire knowledge of how the universe works, explained Sophia, they also expand their minds. This enables them to raise their frequency. When they raise their frequency, added Altar, they can better resonate with their higher density selves. This helps to free them from their third density matrix limitations, and then new high vibrational opportunities become available to them. And when they let go of the third density reality, began Sophia, they become a beacon of light, focused on the higher frequencies, and these higher frequencies can be so much higher than the fifth density. The creative powers of humanity are absolutely awesome, said Maxim. They are so powerful, they can create whole worlds and star systems with their minds. Humanity does not realize the extent of their manifesting power. However, the Dark Ones do, explained Sophia. Humans have two brains, the left and the right brain, and the Dark Ones feed these two hemispheres with frequencies from the lower unconscious hive mind. They control the hive mind of humanity by infiltrating and influencing it with their own agenda. And what are our higher selves doing while our ego is in control? Asked Minerva. I do not understand why they do not step in and show us the way. The higher self will not interfere in your third density experience, said Altar. However, when you are ready, you can start to communicate. It is usually not until an individual can transcend their trapped emotions or master their thoughts and emotions, said Sophia, that they are able to create stronger connections with their higher selves. Well, exclaimed Asteria, I will be on my toes, monitoring my thoughts and my feelings to ensure that I put out a positive frequency. Yes, and only when you choose to change does your higher self step in, said Sophia. However, you must ask for assistance from your higher self to help you to raise your frequency. Your guides are also available, and if you are receptive, they will nudge you in the right direction. And what happens to the ego? Asked Arnau. Once an individual experiences self-love, the ego then quietens, replied Sarah. As already mentioned, the ego is everything other than love, said Ariana. It does not know love. The ego cannot, will not, show an individual the journey of rediscovering their connection to Source and a love of self, I said. The soul has already made the decision to look inwards and ascend before entering their avatar, said Ankai. However, it is the avatar that actually needs to wake up and therefore will determine that journey. And it is the individual avatar who chooses whether that journey will be slow and painful or uplifting and joyful, said Imra. The timeline that a person is on is not necessarily determined by the timeline that they would like to choose, said Sophia. Rather, it is determined by the frequency of their inner world. The emotions that the ego is protecting you from determines your frequency, and they remain there until you surrender to them by feeling those emotions. Now I understand, said Asteria. It is always up to me as to how I feel and what I choose. Yes, and an individual's inner work is their frequency, said Sophia. As a person integrates the unresolved childhood emotions that are trapped in the body, they literally change their DNA, raising themselves to a 5th density plus frequency. "Oh, how exciting!" exclaimed Minerva. "An individual's inner work is their ascension. When an individual is conscious, they know that all words, thoughts, and actions are controlled by them." "That is correct," said Maxim. "This is the mastery of the 3rd density matrix. It is to master our thoughts and emotions and choose love in all circumstances." "Ah, so spiritual work could be described as self-love?" asked Cinderella. "Yes," said Sophia softly. "I am curious about the concept of surrendering to your feelings," said Cinderella. "Are you saying that when the individual is triggered, they need to let go of the trigger or ego and surrender to the feeling that the ego is denying?" "Yes," said Naishara, "and an individual can only integrate their feelings at the time that they are triggered. This is so important to understand." "Well, what is the process to work through when we feel triggered?" asked Cinderella. "Oh, I was hoping that you would ask that question," said Sophia. "Firstly, in the exact moment that you are in fear, recognize the emotion. The emotion may be surfacing as anger, anxiety, confusion, resentment, self-loathing, pity. Well, the list goes on." Sophia shrugged her shoulders and continued in a soft tone. Literally say to yourself, "Something is going on for me," and you do not need to label exactly what it is. "Remember," said Ariana with strength in her voice, "when you are not feeling love, then fear exists. Fear is the opposition to love, so it does not really matter what label you place upon it." "Fear is illusory," said Sophia. "However, your emotions are telling you to the contrary." In short, simply recognize that something is going on for you emotionally. Say it aloud. Something is trying to surface. Asteria closed her eyes. "Something is trying to surface," she said. "Ah, yes, I can see that this is the way to recognize our own emotions, rather than pointing the finger at someone outside of ourselves." "Secondly," continued Sophia, "validate the emotion by saying it aloud to yourself. It is okay for me to feel this way." Repeat this several times until you feel a calmness of acceptance washing through you. Minerva lay down, her head in Arnau's lap, and closing her eyes, she said, "It is okay for me to feel this way." "Oh, sit up!" exclaimed Asteria. "Is your ego wanting to be in control?" asked Minerva, and they both laughed. Remember also that the ego is trying to protect you from these fears by pushing them deeper and deeper into your subconscious mind, continued Sophia softly. So, by stating this to yourself aloud, You are saying to your ego that you are now ready to feel these feelings and you no longer need to repress them. It is okay for me to feel this way, said Asteria. She closed her eyes and then burst out laughing. Oh, I can't I can't say it. Spend a while reassuring yourself that you are now ready, said Sophia. The phrase is simple. It is okay for me to feel this way. It is okay for me to feel this way, repeated Asteria. Thirdly, feel the feelings and allow yourself the expression of these feelings through sound, continued Sophia. You may want to cry, shout, scream, or any sound that may want to surface. Simply allow the sound out. If tears start to roll down your cheeks, allow the sound that may want to accompany those tears. I am feeling jealous, blurted out Asteria, and began to cry. Minerva sat up, and holding Asteria in her arms, she said, Asteria, it is okay to feel this way. Arnau leaned forward and embraced Asteria and Minerva. I love both of you, he said. Healing or transcending these fears is not an intellectual process, said Sophia. It is literally feeling your feelings. It is these feelings that have been repressed because at their time of creation, you were unable to deal with these strong emotions, and at that time, your defense mechanism, the ego, repressed them. I am realizing that I feel jealous because I always thought that Imra loved Minerva more than me, said Asteria. Imra left his kilim cushion and crouched down beside Asteria. I love you both equally, he said. Whatever you need from me, ask me. I am your father, and I am always here to support you. Fourthly, continued Sophia, choose again. At the completion or cessation of feeling these feelings, you will witness another level of calmness washing through you. So be gentle with yourself and center yourself in this calmness. Then simply choose another version of who you are. Choose a version of yourself that will respond to the circumstances that you find yourself in a more uplifting way. This is integration. Oh, said Asteria. As I surrendered to the feeling, I saw myself as a little girl, and you were carrying Minerva on your shoulders, Dad. I decided that you loved her more than me. That belief isn't true. Now, imagine and hold the highest idea of who you are, and embody this new version of yourself by living it every moment of every day, said Sophia. Simultaneously, hold the highest idea of a new earth that exists for you, that reflects the highest idea that you have of yourself. This feels so good, said Asteria. And now I can feel my ego lifting off me, and all I feel is love. I can see that this is how we create. This is how we make manifest new realities. And this is the power of thought. All thoughts create, said Sophia. It is by changing our behavior, said Irama, or behaving differently in the same situations, that we can become the best versions of ourselves. Thank you so much, said Asteria. We all gathered around Asteria, Minerva, Imra, and Arnau, and held each other in a huge group hug. After a few minutes, we settled back into our comfortable positions on the deck. So, what about fifth density beings? Asked Cinderella. How do their egos compare? Remember, the human biology is a designer race, said Sophia, and any species can inhabit the human avatar. Many of the ETs inhabiting the biology of humans have brought their fifth density problems to Earth to be resolved. We incarnate over and over again, I said, to relive our beliefs until we are ready to integrate them. That is correct, said Altar. Remember, many souls come here to experience suffering because at a fifth density level, before coming to Earth, they wanted to resolve their issues in a more powerful way. The third density, if one can master the mind and emotions, is the most powerful transformation that can be experienced. In fifth density, while a being remembers their past lives, they still do have an ego, said Sophia. It is just that in the fifth density, their ego is not as extreme as it is in the third density. In third density, said Sarah, the human being thinks that all they have to do to ascend is change the third density world as they see it. By contrast, said Dulkara, the fifth density being knows that they can create their own world and their own timelines. And, said Maxim, they take responsibility for what they create, instead of thinking that they can change a low-frequency density that can never be transformed. The Avatar's earthly experience is to re-establish their connectedness to all that is, said Altar, and to feel compassion and empathy for all things. In other words, said Sophia, the Avatar's experience is to temporarily feel that disconnection from Prime Creator as real by playing out their program until such time as they awaken to the illusion. Contrast is available throughout the universe, and on third density Earth, some call it good and evil, said Naishara. Now I understand that it is only through contrast that humanity is learning and growing, said Arnau. Our spiritual journey is to integrate the two, the duality of good and evil, and return to Prime Creator, I said. In this way, the universe completes the journey of integration. However, there is always expansion. Knowledge is information, and being informed is an important part of this process, said Sophia. As our awareness expands, we continue to raise our personal frequency. This has the domino effect of enabling us to process more information, said Ankai. This then further raises our frequency. Remember, we have chosen this incarnation. We all choose what we wanted to experience. I will never tire of sharing this one truth, said Sophia softly. All thoughts create. Silence descended upon Orca too, as everyone contemplated these powerful messages. Maxim repositioned the helm to steer a course due east. He felt that in this direction, landfall would be sighted from the bow. "Keep a lookout for landfall. It is not too far away," said Maxim. Everyone turned their focus towards the bow in readiness for sighting land. A renewed excitement began to build and could be felt by us all. And so, my journey continues.